the room she was never meant to enter. Isabella Reyes had learned early in life how to disappear. Not because she wanted to, but because the world had trained her to. On the 32nd floor of Harrow Black Global's glass tower, she moved silently between desks, meeting rooms and executive offices, carrying coffee orders, confidential files and impossible schedules. People rarely looked at her face for more than a second. To most, she wasn't Isabella. She was the assistant. Replaceable. Invisible. Convenient. And tonight, she would make a mistake so small, and yet so life-altering, that it would shatter every assumption anyone had ever made about her, including her own. The annual leadership retreat was supposed to be a reward. A private coastal resort. 5-star service. Champagne flowing like water. The company had just finalized a multi-billion-dollar merger, and CEO Adrian Black, the youngest billionaire in the tech logistics sector, had spared no expense. Executives laughed loudly. Board members toasted one another. Their tailored suits and jeweled watches caught the candlelight as if the night itself bent toward their wealth. Isabella stood near the edge of it all, smiling politely, her feet aching in heels she'd bought on sale because appearance mattered more than comfort in rooms like these. She had coordinated everything. The flights. The accommodations. The schedules. The presentations that won the deal. And yet, when the applause came, it passed right over her. Adrian, that closing speech was brilliant, one investor gushed. To Black Global's future, another cheered. No one said her name. No one ever did. Adrian Black stood at the head of the table, calm and commanding. His presence alone silenced rooms. Dark eyes sharp, posture controlled, every movement deliberate. The kind of man who made people straighten their backs without realizing why. He lifted his glass. This success belongs to the team. Applause followed. Isabella clapped with everyone else, her smile fixed, her heart oddly hollow. She had stayed awake for 3 nights straight preparing the merger briefs after an executive pulled out last minute. She had taken calls at 3 a.m., absorbed blame that wasn't hers, fixed problems no one knew existed. And now, she was exhausted beyond reason. "Drink?" her coworker Lena whispered, nudging a champagne flute toward her. "Just tonight. You've earned it more than anyone." Isabella hesitated. She rarely drank. She couldn't afford mistakes. Not when people already assumed so little of her. But tonight, the ocean breeze was warm. The laughter was loud. And for once, she wanted to feel like she belonged. One glass turned into 2. The edges of the world softened. By the time the dinner ended, Isabella's head was spinning, not from arrogance like the others, but from bone-deep fatigue. She excused herself quietly. The resort corridors were long, dim, and identical. Plush carpet muffled her steps as she leaned against the wall, breathing slowly, telling herself to focus. Room 614, she thought. Or was it 641? Her key card trembled in her hand as she stopped in front of a door. The number blurred. She swiped. Green light. The door opened. Relief washed over her. Inside, the room was dark and spacious. The scent of cedar and expensive cologne lingered faintly in the air, but Isabella was too tired to notice. She kicked off her shoes, set her clutch on the table and collapsed onto the massive bed. The mattress felt like clouds. She didn't even pull the blanket up before sleep claimed her. An hour later, Adrian Black returned to his suite. He loosened his tie, mind still replaying boardroom figures, risk projections, future expansions. The dinner had gone well. The deal was secured. Yet something unsettled him, a familiar restlessness success never seemed to cure. He stepped inside, flicked on the lamp, and froze. Someone was in his bed. His instincts flared instantly. Security. Intrusion. Breach. Then he saw her face. Isabella Reyes. His assistant. Fast asleep. Her dark hair spilled across his pillow. Her dress, simple, elegant, understated, creased from the way she'd curled into herself, like someone used to taking up as little space as possible. Adrian didn't move. In 2 years of working together, she had never once crossed a line. Never arrived late. Never complained. Never faltered. And now here she was. Vulnerable. Human. Exhausted. He should wake her immediately. That was the rational choice. But something stopped him. Perhaps it was the way her brow relaxed in sleep, as if this was the first time in months she wasn't carrying the weight of everyone else's expectations. Perhaps it was the realization, uncomfortable and undeniable, that he had never truly seen her before. He sighed quietly. Adrian took a blanket from the closet and sat in the armchair by the window. He would deal with it in the morning. Dawn arrived softly. Isabella woke with a stretch, and then panic slammed into her chest. This wasn't her room. The furniture was different. Larger. Darker. More refined. Her breath caught as she sat up. Then she saw him. Adrian Black sat across the room, jacket off, sleeves rolled, eyes already on her. "Good morning," he said calmly. The blood drained from her face. She scrambled off the bed, horrified. "Mr. Black, I'm so sorry, I must have my card. It opened the door, I thought." She couldn't even finish. This was it. She would be fired. Labeled careless. Another stereotype confirmed. "I made a mistake," she said, voice shaking. "I'll understand if you want someone else." This was completely unprofessional. Adrian stood. "You worked harder on that merger than anyone else," he said quietly. "One mistake doesn't erase that." She blinked, stunned. "You slept," he added. "I didn't." Guilt flooded her. "You didn't wake me?" "I chose not to." Their eyes met. For the first time there was no desk between them. No hierarchy. No titles. Just two people standing in the aftermath of an accident neither could undo. "I won't tell anyone," he said. "This stays between us." "Thank you," she whispered. She left quickly, heart racing. But the mistake didn't stay contained. At breakfast, a senior investor mentioned seeing Adrian with a woman, leaving his suite that morning. Assumptions bloomed like wildfire. And before Isabella could correct anyone, Adrian made a choice. One that would change her life. "We'll let them believe it," he said later, voice low, controlled. "Just until the investment is finalized." "You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend?" she asked, stunned. "For the company," he replied. Isabella hesitated. This wasn't about romance. It was about power. And she had never had any. Yet she nodded. "Strictly professional," she said. Adrian extended his hand. "Strictly." As their hands touched, something dangerous sparked between them. Neither of them knew it yet, but the room she had entered by mistake was only the beginning. She had stepped into a world that would soon be forced to see her clearly. The pretense that turned into a trial. By the time the jet touched down back in the city, the story had already begun to rewrite Isabella Reyes's existence. She felt it in the sideways glances at the private terminal. In the way conversations dipped when she walked past. In the sudden, curious smiles that never reached anyone's eyes. She had spent years being invisible, now she was something else entirely. Talked about. Adrian Black walked beside her, composed as ever, his hand hovering near the small of her back just long enough for the cameras to capture what looked like familiarity. Not intimacy, yet. Just enough to make the illusion real. "Remember," he murmured as they passed through the press corridor, "we don't oversell it. Come. Natural." Isabella nodded, pulse hammering. "I know." What she didn't say was that nothing about this felt natural. At the office the next morning, the shift was immediate and brutal. The receptionist's smile tightened. A senior analyst who had never bothered to learn Isabella's name now greeted her with exaggerated warmth. A vice president she'd once corrected, quietly, professionally, looked her up and down as if re-evaluating a mispriced asset. She reached her desk to find a bouquet of flowers waiting. No card. No sender. Just roses, deep red, unmistakable. Her stomach dropped. "Wow," Lena whispered, appearing beside her. "Guess it's official." Isabella swallowed. "It's complicated." Lena laughed softly. "Isn't it always? Just be careful. People here don't like fairy tales unless they can take credit for them." The day unfolded like a slow interrogation. Meetings where her suggestions were suddenly questioned, not for clarity but for legitimacy. Emails copied to 3 additional executives for transparency. Whispered jokes she pretended not to hear. She must be sleeping her way up. Lucky girl. Guess competence comes in many forms. Isabella kept her head down. She had survived worse. What stung wasn't the cruelty, it was the sudden erasure of everything she had earned. Overnight, years of discipline were rewritten into a single, humiliating narrative. Adrian noticed. He noticed the way she flinched when addressed casually. The way her shoulders tensed when someone joked too freely. He noticed the silence that followed her in rooms that once relied on her voice. During a strategy session, when a board member interrupted her mid-sentence, Adrian didn't hesitate. "Let her finish," he said sharply. The room went still. Isabella continued, hands steady despite the tremor inside her. When she concluded, the room nodded, begrudgingly. Adrian caught her gaze. A quiet acknowledgement passed between them. But protection came at a price. By the end of the week, the whispers had sharpened into resentment. She was invited to dinners she once would have coordinated but never attended. She sat beside Adrian at charity events, smiling for photos, careful with her distance, her laugh measured, her eyes constantly aware of who was watching. Every moment was a performance. And performances demanded endurance. One night, after a long investor dinner, Adrian drove her home himself. The city lights blurred past in silence. "You don't have to do this," he said finally. She looked at him, surprised. "We're in it now. That doesn't mean you have to absorb the fallout alone." She exhaled. "I've been absorbing fallout my whole life." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Adrian glanced at her, something unreadable crossing his face. They stopped at a red light. "Why?" he asked. She hesitated. Then, quietly, "Because people decide who you are long before they bother to know you." The light changed. He didn't press. The following week brought the first real test. An internal review meeting, closed door, executive only. Isabella was there to present operational projections she had built from the ground up. Halfway through, a senior director leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Do we know who actually prepared this analysis?" he asked, eyes flicking pointedly between Isabella and Adrian. The implication hung heavy. Isabella felt heat flood her cheeks. Before Adrian could speak, she did. "I did," she said evenly. "I built the model, validated the data, and ran the simulations. If there are concerns, I'm happy to address them." Silence. Then the director smiled thinly. "Of course. Just making sure proper channels were followed." Adrian leaned forward. They were. The meeting ended shortly after. In the hallway, Isabella's hands finally shook. "I'm sorry," Adrian said quietly. "I didn't anticipate." "You did," she interrupted softly. "You just hoped people would be better." He didn't deny it. That night, Isabella stayed late, reviewing reports, double-checking figures. Precision was her armor. Excellence her defense. When she finally stood to leave, Adrian was waiting by her desk. "You missed dinner?" he said. "I wasn't hungry." He studied her for a moment. "Come with me." They drove to a small restaurant tucked between brick buildings. No cameras, no press, no polished performance. Just quiet. Over simple food, something shifted. They talked, not about work, not about the act. She told him about her mother, who cleaned offices at night so Isabella could attend college. About scholarships and late nights and learning to be smaller so others could be louder. He listened. Really listened. "I never asked," he said. "No one does," she replied. The week stretched on. The act became easier. The scrutiny did not. Then came the leak. An anonymous message circulated through internal channels. Screenshots, speculation, half-truths stitched into something ugly. Accusations dressed as concern. Isabella was called into HR. She walked in alone. The questions were polite. The assumptions were not. When she left, her hands were numb. Adrian was waiting outside. "They have no grounds," he said, fury barely contained. "It doesn't matter," she replied. "Damage doesn't need proof." That night she cried for the first time since the mistake. Not in his arms. Alone. The next morning, the board called an emergency meeting. Adrian stood before them. "This ends now," he said. He presented timelines. Documentation. Emails. Proof of Isabella's contributions long before the pretense began. One by one the room quieted. Then he said something no one expected. "My relationship status does not define my assistant's competence. If that's the narrative this company prefers, then perhaps the problem isn't her." The room shifted. After the meeting, Isabella found him on the terrace. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I did," he replied. They stood side by side, city stretching below. For the first time she felt something unfamiliar. Not fear. Not shame. Respect. But the lie still hovered between them, fragile, necessary, and dangerous. Because the longer it lasted, the harder it became to tell where the performance ended. And the truth began. The woman they never bothered to know. The first crack in the illusion didn't come from gossip. It came from success. Isabella Reyes noticed it the morning the quarterly numbers came in. The European expansion, once fragile, dependent on investor confidence, was outperforming projections by nearly 17%. Logistics bottlenecks had been reduced. Vendor costs renegotiated. Delays eliminated. All because of a framework she had quietly designed months ago, before the retreat, before the mistake, before anyone thought to look twice at her. She stared at the screen, heart pounding. This wasn't luck. This was her work. When she presented the report later that day, the room was different. Executives leaned forward. Questions were sharper, not dismissive but genuinely curious. The same people who once interrupted her now scribbled notes as she spoke. Adrian watched from the end of the table, saying nothing. For the first time, Isabella didn't need him to. But success doesn't silence resentment, it amplifies it. By the following week, whispers had evolved into something colder. Strategic. Dangerous. A board subcommittee requested a full audit of process influences. The phrasing was neutral. The intent was not. Isabella was being tested. She felt it in the way her calendar suddenly filled with clarification meetings. In the way executives asked her to resend data she had already provided. In the polite smiles that never reached their eyes. They weren't trying to disprove her work. They were trying to exhaust her. One evening, as rain streaked the office windows, Isabella remained at her desk long after the floor had emptied. Her shoulders ached. Her eyes burned. But she kept going. Adrian emerged from his office, jacket draped over one arm. "You're still here," he said. "So are you." He studied her carefully. "You don't have to prove anything." She didn't look up. "I do." He stepped closer. "To whom?" She paused. Then softly, "To myself." He said nothing. The audit meeting arrived on a gray Tuesday morning. Isabella walked into the boardroom alone. No Adrian beside her, no performance to hide behind. The long table gleamed under harsh lights. Faces stared back at her, measured and skeptical. The chairwoman spoke first. "Ms. Reyes, thank you for coming." Isabella nodded. "Of course." The questions began. They were technical, detailed, unforgiving. And Isabella answered every one. She explained systems architecture, data validation, risk mitigation. She cited timelines, contracts, and contingency plans without glancing at her notes. 20 minutes in, someone leaned back, impressed despite themselves. An hour later, silence filled the room. Finally, one of the older board members cleared his throat. "Where did you learn to do this?" Isabella met his gaze. "Experience," she said. "And necessity." The meeting ended without accusation. But the damage had already drawn blood. That afternoon, Isabella was called into HR again. This time the tone was colder. "We've received concerns," the director said. "About boundaries. About influence." Isabella folded her hands in her lap. "Are there allegations?" "No," the woman replied smoothly. "Just perceptions." Perceptions. Isabella left the office numb. In the elevator, she pressed her forehead against the cool metal wall, eyes closing. She had done everything right. And it still wasn't enough. That night, Adrian showed up at her apartment unannounced. She opened the door, startled. "I heard," he said simply. She stepped aside. The apartment was small but immaculate. Bookshelves lined the walls, finance, engineering, philosophy. Not what people expected. Adrian noticed. "You never told me," he said quietly. "You never asked." They sat at opposite ends of the couch, distance heavy between them. "They're trying to force a narrative," he said. "And I'm done letting it happen." She looked at him. "Then stop." He frowned. "What?" "Stop protecting me. Stop explaining me. Let me stand on my own." The words hung in the air. "That's exactly what they want," he replied. "No," she said. "They want me small. You standing in front of me keeps me there." He leaned back, conflicted. She took a breath. "There's something you should know." She stood, walked to the bookshelf, and pulled down a thin folder. She handed it to him. Inside were certificates, degrees, recommendations. Adrian's eyes widened as he flipped through them. Top-tier university, dual majors, honors, patents. "You have a master's in systems engineering," he said slowly. "And an MBA," she added. "Night classes, scholarships, loans. You never put this on your profile." "I was told it would make people uncomfortable." He looked up at her, stunned. "They hired me because I was efficient," she continued. "Not threatening. I stayed that way because it was safer." Silence stretched. "They don't know who you are," Adrian said finally. She met his gaze. "Neither did you." The truth settled between them, not accusatory, just real. The following morning, Isabella submitted a formal request. Role reclassification. Operational authority. Direct reporting line, separate from Adrian. The office buzzed. By noon, rumors exploded. By evening, the board convened. Adrian was furious. "You don't need permission to exist," he said. "I need independence," she replied. "From you. From the story. You think this will end it?" "No," she said softly. "But it will start something real." The board meeting was brutal. Objections flew. Concerns voiced. Risks cited. Then Isabella spoke. Not defensively. Not emotionally. She laid out her contributions. Quantified impact. Measurable results. She ended with one sentence. I don't need special treatment. I need accurate recognition. The vote was delayed. But the seed was planted. That evening, as she packed her things, Adrian watched her from his office doorway. You're walking away, he said. I'm stepping forward. He nodded slowly. You've already changed this place, he said. Then let it change me back, she replied. They stood there, something unspoken heavy between them. The lie was unraveling. And neither of them knew what would remain when it was gone. The fall they planned for her. The vote came 3 days later. Denied. No explanation. No meeting. Just a sterile email from the board secretary informing Isabella Reyes that her request for role reclassification was not aligned with current organizational priorities. She read it once. Then again. Then she closed her laptop and sat very still. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The office didn't change overnight, but the air did. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms. Invitations disappeared from her calendar. Projects she had built were quietly reassigned. They didn't fire her. They erased her. By Friday, a rumor surfaced that hurt more than the rest. She manipulated him. Not that she was unqualified. Not that she had overstepped. But that she had schemed. An anonymous post leaked to an industry blog, suggesting favoritism, impropriety, blurred ethics at the top of Harrow Black Global. It didn't name her directly. It didn't have to. Investors called. Partners hesitated. The stock dipped 2 points before noon. The board panicked. And in panic, they chose the easiest target. Isabella was summoned to a closed-door emergency session. This time, Adrian was not invited. The chairwoman didn't waste time. For the good of the company, she said, we need distance. Isabella understood immediately. You want me to resign. We're offering you the opportunity to do so quietly. Isabella's throat tightened. And if I don't? The woman's gaze hardened. Then the narrative won't be kind. For a moment, Isabella said nothing. She thought of her mother scrubbing floors after midnight. Of scholarships earned and dignity swallowed. Of years spent being smaller so others felt bigger. She stood. I won't resign. Murmurs rippled. You're making this harder than it needs to be, someone warned. No, she replied steadily. I'm making it honest. She walked out. By evening, the headlines broke. Billionaire CEO under investigation for office relationship. Assistant at Center of Ethics storm. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Adrian showed up at her apartment minutes later. They went behind my back, he said, furious. I can stop this. She shook her head. If you do, it proves them right. They're destroying you. She met his eyes. They've been doing that quietly for years. Silence. Then she said the words that shattered the illusion completely. This ends tonight. Adrian stiffened. What? The pretense. The protection. All of it. I won't be your scandal. You're not. I am, she interrupted. And I won't let it define me. She stepped back. I'm filing a formal disclosure tomorrow. Full transparency. My work. My credentials. My timeline. He stared at her. That could cost you everything. She nodded. It already has. The next morning, Isabella stood alone in a packed conference room. Cameras lined the walls. Reporters whispered. Executives avoided her gaze. She took the podium. I was hired as an assistant, she began. But I was never hired because of my mind. Murmurs. She continued. She spoke of her education. Her patents. Her frameworks. She presented timestamps, contributions, documentation. She showed them the truth. Then she said the words no one expected. I did not advance because of proximity. I survived despite it. Silence. Adrian stood at the back of the room, jaw tight. When questions came, they were sharp. Were you involved with the CEO? She took a breath. Yes, she said. In a lie designed to protect the company. Gasp. And it ends today. The room erupted. That afternoon, the board issued a statement distancing itself from both of them. Adrian was furious. I'll resign, he told her. I won't let them. She stopped him. Don't. Why? Because this isn't about you saving me. It's about them facing what they did. That night, she packed her apartment. By morning, she was gone. No forwarding address. No goodbye. The industry watched, waiting for her to disappear. But Isabella Reyes didn't vanish. She reappeared, elsewhere. A month later, a competitor announced a breakthrough logistics system. Designed by Isabella Reyes. The market shifted. The board froze. And Adrian realized something too late. They hadn't pushed her out. They had unleashed her. The respect they couldn't deny. The announcement landed like an earthquake. Stock tickers flashed red and green in frantic patterns as analysts scrambled to understand how a mid-sized competitor had suddenly leapt years ahead in operational efficiency. Shipping times collapsed. Costs dropped. Entire supply chains rerouted with surgical precision. And behind it all was one name. Isabella Reyes. Her face appeared on business channels across the world, calm, composed, unmistakably confident. Not as an assistant. Not as a scandal. But as a founder. She stood on a minimalist stage in a tailored suit, answering questions with clarity and restraint. No bitterness. No theatrics. Just truth. "We didn't reinvent logistics," she said during one interview. "We removed the assumptions that slowed it down." Viewers leaned in. She spoke about invisible labor. About overlooked talent. About systems that reward proximity over competence. And people listened. At Harrow Black Global, silence replaced arrogance. Board members stared at screens replaying her interviews. Executives realized, too late, that the frameworks powering their recent success had walked out the door with her. The competitor's valuation doubled in 6 weeks. Harrow Black Global stock continued to slide. An emergency board meeting was called. Adrian entered the room with a calm he didn't feel. They were never protecting the company, he said. They were protecting themselves. No one argued. The chairwoman finally spoke. "We misjudged her." Adrian met her gaze. "You dismissed her." That distinction mattered. Within days the investigation quietly ended. There was no evidence. Only regret. Adrian resigned shortly after. Not in disgrace, but in clarity. The media speculated. The industry buzzed. Then quietly he requested a meeting. Isabella agreed. They met in a glass-walled cafe overlooking the city, neutral ground. She looked different. Lighter. Grounded. "You built something incredible," he said. She smiled faintly. "So did you." He nodded. "I should have trusted you sooner." "You trusted me," she replied. "You just didn't step aside." They sat in comfortable silence. "I'm not here to ask for anything," Adrian said finally. "I just wanted to say this, what they did to you was wrong. What I allowed was incomplete." She met his eyes. "You learned. That matters." "And us?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer immediately. "I don't need saving," she said at last. "I need partnership." A smile touched his lips. "I can do that." Months later, Isabella Reyes was invited back, not as an employee, as a peer. At an international summit on ethical leadership, she stood on stage while the same executives who once ignored her now applauded. She spoke simply. "Respect isn't earned through titles," she said. "It's revealed through character." The room rose to its feet. Adrian watched from the audience. This time he didn't stand in front of her. He stood beside her. Because the room she had entered by mistake had never been about a bed. It was about power. And she had claimed her own.